On the show last week, Ted and I said that collection agents aren't making a lot of collection calls because of the virus. Is that true? And if so, what happens when they're back to work? Let's ask a collection agent starting right now.
This is Debt Free in 30. Here's your host, Doug Hoyes.
Let's get started. Who are you and what do you do?
Hi, Doug. I'm Blair Demarco-Wettlaufer. I'm the managing partner of Kingston Data and Credit, a national collection agency.
Well, thank you for being back here on the show, Blair. You were on the show, show number 20 back in January 2015, show number 57 in October 2015. And those were pretty good shows. The first one we talked about how to stop the collection calls, and you gave some advice on that. The second show was collection agents, how did they find me? That was an interesting one because we talked about social media and a few other things. So I'll put links to those. People can go back and listen to them. And then you were on again in September of 2019, whatever that was, 6 months ago. And we talked about how to negotiate with a collection agent. So you've been giving us some good advice so far. I wanted to have you back on now in the middle of the big pandemic. We are recording this on Tuesday, April the 28th at about 10 o'clock in the morning. We're now a month into the shutdown due to the virus. Businesses are closed. Some people are working from home. So I want to know what is happening in the collection industry. Are collection agents still collecting? Are they shut down? What's happening?
Yes, they are still collecting. There's been a big disruption with the pandemic, and some collection agencies are shut down, not because of regulation, not because of the stay-at-home order. Most of the regulators, the provincial regulators, have weighed in and said, yes, we understand you're working from home. This is how we interpret the Collection Act in our province, or here's how we're being reasonable with the Collection Act in our province. Some agencies are shut down for two reasons. One, they represent the financial institutes, the big banks, and the big banks, at least at the beginning of this, had said, stop our collection work, which would take away a large portion of their work. The other problem is a lot of these collection agencies aren't set up technically to have people work from home. If you have an office of 600 people and you send everyone to work from home, there's no way they have the internet bandwidth to support 600 people working remotely. So there has been disruption and some agencies have been shut down. Others are still collecting as they normally would, hopefully with a little bit of compassion.
Yeah, and speaking of regulation, you did send me a copy of the registrar's bulletin that was issued on March 19th, 2020, signed by Shane Gallagher, who's the registrar of collection agents. I mean, he works for the Ministry of Government and Consumer Services. And basically that's what he said. He said, you got to follow whatever the rules are as set out by the government. So if there's a stay-at-home order, well, then you got to stay at home. If you can't have too many people together, you can't have too many people together. So I think that's what you were referring to.
That's right.
What are the big banks doing? Because obviously as a collection agent, and well, let's be clear about what your background is then. So the name of your agency is what?
Kingston Data and Credit.
And would you call yourself a mid-sized agency? How would you define yourself?
Yeah. We would be probably in the top 20. There are about 400 collection agencies in Canada, and most of them are 10 agents or less. The big ones are 100, 200, 400, 600. We're in the middle there.
Gotcha. And so we're obviously a little more able to respond to this than the guy who's got 600 collectors and had to dump them all at home. I'd like to get back to talking about size, but first of all, so as a collection agent, you are collecting for somebody else. Somebody says, right, here's the debt I want you to collect. So let's start by talking about the big banks because they are the biggest people in the country. Sure. Are they still calling their collection agencies and saying, collect, collect, collect? What's been happening since the beginning of the virus?
Well, I'm not in personal communication with all the banks all the time. But I do know, speaking to one credit manager at a bank early on, they had shut down their work, saying, we're not going to collect at the moment. I talked to him later and he said, okay, we're going to turn it on slowly. We're going to deal with inbound calls, or we're going to make a limited number of outbound calls. So my impression, and this is my gut feeling rather than factual, is the banks turned everything off. They realized this is going to take a long time, and we're slowly making our way back to normal. And during that time, they've turned it back on, because this is a shock to the system. When you turn collections off, debt isn't erased with a magic wand. It's still there. But people are having hardship. They're working from home. Their hours have been cut. They've been laid off. People are having financial hardship. So they've got to go in with some understanding and some reasonableness. Some people have not been compromised. They're working from home. They still have their income. They can pay their bills. Some people can't, and they've got to be cognizant of that. And it's sending ripple effects. So the banks are slowly turning things back on. The credit bureaus are figuring out how to deal with all these deferrals, so it doesn't harm people's credit ratings. Things are slowly going to return back to normal, but we're going to be living in this world where you and I are working from our basements probably for the next 6 to 12 months.
Well, and we are both in our basements right now. So that's absolutely true. Now, you raised the issue of deferrals. So let's talk about that. I understand the concept. Maybe I can't make my mortgage payment this month or my car loan payment. So I call up the bank and they say, yeah, no problem. We'll let you defer this month's payment. We're not forgiving it, but we'll tack it on to the end or whatever. Great. Fantastic. Right. How does that get reported to the credit bureau? Because I've made a deal with the bank. The bank is happy with me. I'm not in default, that we both agreed to the deferral. Do I have to worry about what's going to show up on my credit report?
Well, you as the end user, no, you don't need to be concerned by it. The banks will report it as a deferral to the bureaus. The bureaus are obviously figuring out how to have this recorded. Because if you have a trade line item and you have an R1 rating, and you make your payment on time, it shows as a 1. If you make a 30-day payment, payment 30 days late, it shows as a 2. 60 days late, it shows as a 3. And your overall score, and if you look at your bureau, it'll show 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 1, 2, and your overall score is based on the average of that. So if you are late 1 month out of 60, you have an R1 rating. If you defer your payment, that's probably, and I am guessing here, going to show as an X, where a payment wasn't due. I have no idea personally how that affects the calculations for the R1 rating, and the bureaus haven't announced how they're going to deal with this. I believe they're trying to figure this out, because say they defer your rent payment for 6 months, it's going to say 111 X X X X X. That may have an impact on your score. You, the consumer, don't need to worry about it. The bank doesn't need to worry about it. The bureaus do, and I am certain the bureaus are going to come up with some way to deal with this. Because this isn't just one deferred payment, likely it's 3 to 6.
Well, and as a consumer, I do need to worry about it, because if the bank reports it as a deferral, like you say, an X, but right, the credit bureau's algorithm says, oh, wait a minute, this is a payment wasn't made, and the calculation right, then shows, moves me from an R1 to an R2, or it affects my credit score, then this could be an issue. So I guess what you're saying right now, we don't know. We assume right, the banks are reporting everything correctly, but the credit bureau has never had to have an algorithm to factor in what a deferral actually means. And so
there's no pandemic code. Yeah.
Right. There is no pandemic code. So we don't exactly know how it's going to be impacted. Right. So, okay. So I think that's something we're going to want to keep an eye on and see what shakes out in the future. And
consumers should always pull their bureau at least once a year, just to see what's on there, to make sure the data is correct, dispute anything that's not. There are links to request your bureaus for free anytime. Not just, I know that TransUnion and Equifax are offering free bureaus during the pandemic. They're required to offer free bureaus once a year to everyone, no matter what. If you don't have the links for that, I can always provide that. My advice to consumers at this point is pull your bureau now, and then pull your bureau again in 3 months and just see how they've dealt with this, especially if you've deferred a payment, and keep an eye on it.
Yeah, and those are good points. Both Equifax and TransUnion are offering free bureaus online,
Mhm.
TransUnion has been doing that for a long time. Equifax, you had to mail something in. Now, the last time I looked, Equifax was only offering that till the end of April. I don't know if they've extended, but again, you can fill out the form and send it in and get it for free as well. So I
Right.
totally agree with that. In fact, my advice is get your bureau from TransUnion, wait 6 months, get it from Equifax, wait 6 months, get it from TransUnion. That way you're getting a bureau every 6 months. And if it is
keep in
showing up,
mind, and keep in mind your bureau with TransUnion and Equifax may be different because some creditors report to one and not the other.
Yeah. And so if it's reporting as late payment when it was actually a deferral, that's something you want to jump on because, hey, the deal was that I did what I was required to do based on my deal with the bank. So,
And there are online dispute forms where you can dispute a rating if you don't agree with it, and the bureaus are required to investigate it. If you need those links, I can give those to you.
No, that's cool. I'll put the links in the show notes on our YouTube page. The point is we don't exactly know what's going to happen, so we're going to want to be keeping a close eye on this. What should I expect then? So let's say I have a debt, and let's say I've been laid off work because of the pandemic, and so I'm starting to get behind. Should I expect to be receiving phone calls from collection agents? Should I expect them to be in an accommodating mood? What should I expect?
Well, if you owe money, you should expect that you may get called. I personally believe that collection agencies should be accommodating during this time. But they should basically take when you call somebody, if they have the money, they should pay. If somebody has been laid off or is out of work or has a shortcome of income, the agencies anytime, not just during a pandemic time, should be reasonable and accommodating. They should work with freezing the interest so you're not just treading water. They should work out a payment arrangement that's within your means so you're not promising something you can't keep up. They should be working with you. During the case of a pandemic, they should just be doing more of that because more people are impacted. So yes, I believe that people should expect that they are going to get calls, but they should expect the agent to be a little more accommodating under the circumstances.
And is one of the reasons for that the fact that certainly here in Ontario, and I think pretty much everywhere else in Canada, the courts are closed.
Right.
So if you phone me up and I say, hey, look, man, I can't pay, it's not like you can say, well, I'm going to be taking you to court tomorrow, because you can't take me to court tomorrow. Now you might be able to take me to court in a month or 2 months, but
and the Limitations Act has been extended. So there's a 2-year window for reporting for filing a court claim while the courts are closed, while everything's suspended. That limitation period is being extended.
Right. And so typically we're going to simplify the law here a bit, but once I stop making a payment, the 2-year clock starts to run. Right. And now it might end up being a clock that runs for 2 years and 3 months.
Right.
So the time that a creditor has to sue you has been extended. So you can't just ignore this, I guess, is really what we're saying.
Right. If you deal with your creditors in good faith, there are options. Like our agency, if somebody is making payments and they're in a financial hardship situation, 90% of our clients will allow us to freeze the interest, which is only fair to the consumer because we see so many people who are borrowing from one payday loan company to pay another, and they're just treading water and they're throwing away $500, $600, $700 a month in interest, which is insane. So we do our part to try to work with people who can only afford $50 or $100 a month. So they're actually bringing their balance down.
And is that something that a collection agency typically would do, or is that something that your agency does because you have that arrangement with the people you are collecting from?
I would say in normal circumstances, the collection agencies that represent the banks and the big creditors may not have that flexibility from the client. Under current circumstances, I think it's a reasonable thing that a consumer should ask. And certainly the worst they can hear is no. There's no harm in asking for the interest to being deferred.
So practical advice then, I've been laid off, or maybe I'm still working, but my income is impaired somewhat. A collector does phone me. So first thing I should do is what? I should say, hey, can you at least freeze the interest? Or how would you be negotiating if you were the person?
We were talking earlier. First, agree that the account is legitimate and the balance is correct. If you want a collection letter, you certainly have a right to do so. Most agencies can send that letter to you by email because the post service is running a little slow right now. Once you agree that the debt is valid.
So just on that point then, before you as a collection agent, you are a third party collector. You're collecting on behalf of the original creditor. Right. You have to be able to prove to me in writing or by email that you have the right to collect that account. And I have the right to say, hey, send me something by email in writing that proves that.
Right. So in Ontario, we are required to, there are three options. One is we can mail you a letter. One is we can send you a letter electronically, like a notice of retainer saying, we, Kingston Data and Credit, represent XYZ company in the matter of a balance of $400. The other thing we can do that the law got changed a couple years ago, we can call before sending a letter to reach out and offer a letter and then negotiate.
Gotcha. So one way or the other, before I'm dealing with a collection agent, they should be able to prove to me that, yes, in fact, they have taken over this account. Okay, right. So back to practical advice then. Step number one, let's make sure it's legit. I actually owe the money and you're actually entitled to collect it. What then, assuming I don't have the money to pay it in full? If I do, then I just pay it. But if I don't, what would be my next step?
If your income is reduced or you have multiple creditors where you owe a lot of people, try to negotiate a reasonable payment arrangement. A lot of people that we contact, believe it or not, are emotionally distraught about their debts and they overpromise. They say, oh, I'll pay $300 a month. And they can't maintain that arrangement because the next creditor calls and they say, oh, I'll pay you $300 a month. And suddenly they've run out of money. Make an arrangement that's within your means. It's far better to be honest with the agent saying, look, I owe 6 creditors, a total of $15,000. I'm going to pay you $100 a month, and we'll see where we're at. Most agents will work with you on that. Ask to have the interest frozen. There's no harm in doing that. And if you owe a huge amount of money and you can't pay it, be honest with the agent and say, I can't pay this. I'm out of work. I have no income. I owe you and the following other collection agencies. It's simply beyond my means right now.
And they pretty much would know that because they've got access to your credit report, I assume?
Right. Yes.
So this is not some, like, don't say you owe 12 other people if you don't, but if you do, right. They probably already know it anyways.
Yeah, we've seen cases where, oh, I'm in a financial hardship situation and I can only pay $50 a month. Well, really, Mr. Hoyes, it says here you drive a BMW that's worth $120,000 and you're making your $800 payments and your credit card's clear, and we can see that. Be honest. And be calm. Most people who owe money are emotionally wound up over the fact they owe money, and it's understandable. It's stressful. Don't add to the stress by being emotional with the agent. Take a deep breath and say, okay, let's talk about this. The agent can't climb through the phone and toilet paper your house. The agent will be reasonable with you, or should be reasonable with you, if you're reasonable with the agent, and say, here's my financial situation. Let's talk nuts and bolts. Here's what I can do, or here's what I can't do. If your financial situation is uncertain, like you've applied for the government, $2,000 a month, and you're out of work and you have no income right now, obviously pay for your food first and your rent and the things that keep the roof over your head, and say to the agent, look, I'll make a good faith payment right now. And a good faith payment is not $4,000 or $10,000. A good faith payment is $50, $20, something to show your intent, because actions speak louder than words, and say, look, can you leave me alone for 30 days while I get my feet under me? But only do that if you agree with the debt, it's valid, because you're acknowledging the debt by a payment.
Right. And that's a key point, because we just talked about the limitations period, which is 2 years or a little bit longer under these circumstances. So if I haven't made a payment on this debt for 3 years, and now I give the agent $20, well, I just started the limitation clock starting again.
Right. Because you've acknowledged the debt through a payment. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, and obviously if you're in a situation where your total debts are $50,000 and the job you expect to go back to is going to pay you $2,500 a month, then you've got more serious problems than getting the interest frozen. There's just no way to deal with that then.
Right. And you should see a trustee.
That's an excellent commercial there. I'm glad you threw that in. And yeah, I think your opinion and my opinion is the same. If you have the ability to pay it, then you should pay it. If you have the ability to pay it over a period of time, then pay it over a period of time. Work something out. But if you're in a situation where you've got a massive amount of debt that you'll never be able to hope to repay, putting up with collection calls for the next 2 years doesn't make any sense. A collection agent doesn't want to be making those phone calls. So in that case, yes, you reach out to a licensed insolvency trustee. We come up with some kind of a plan. Obviously, we notify the collection agents that you've filed a consumer proposal or a bankruptcy. The calls stop, and then we all get on with it. So,
Absolutely.
okay, so that's good practical advice then. And I guess to summarize, don't promise something you can't do.
Absolutely.
So you want to be the boss. If I know I've got $2,000 coming in next month and I got to pay rent, I got to buy groceries. Well, I can't offer to pay $2,000 to a collection agent. So
right.
Only do what you can. Okay, now, so that's good. We've looked at this from the point of the consumer, and I think we've given some good practical advice. And just to clarify then, in virtually all cases, you've got the person's credit report in front of you when you're making a phone call, or have easy access to
well,
it?
Depends on the debt. We don't pull a bureau on every single file. If Bob Smith owes $20,000 on a bank credit card, yes, we're going to pull his bureau. If Susan Jones owes $45 for an ambulance ride, we're not pulling a bureau on that. We're using common sense.
And do you have to pay when you pull a bureau?
Yes, it does cost us.
Yes.
Agents can pay anywhere from $1 to $15 for every credit bureau they pull. If they pull a full bureau, depending on the size of the agency and what they've negotiated with the credit bureaus, or they can do a scrub. We talked about this in a previous episode of How Do Agents Find Me. They can pull last known address, last known phone number, the dates those were updated, and they can pull those in batch, and that could cost significantly less than $1 per file.
Gotcha. So you're not pulling it in every case, but where it's warranted, you would, because obviously it costs you money to do that. So,
right.
Okay. So we've looked at this from the point of the consumer. Now, you alluded to this earlier on. So the last topic I want to cover is, what does the future look like? I want you to pull out your crystal ball here. So there are, as you said, many collection agencies in Ontario. There are a few really, really big ones, and then there's a whole bunch of really tiny ones, and you're kind of a little bit in the middle. So a huge agency would have many hundreds of collectors, and they could all be located in the same spot. Is that correct?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Cubicle hell. 600 people all in a converted superstore, or the 2 floors of a office building downtown Toronto, with everyone working shoulder to shoulder in headsets and cubicles. My definition of a personal hell. That
does not sound fun. And so those agencies are not going to be up and running anytime soon.
Right. So yesterday, Doug Ford and the Ontario government announced the stages for going back to normal. And one of the things that is alluded to, we're all light on details right now, is there's got to be social distancing in the workplace when they do reopen this. Those 600 people can't just come back to work and go into their cubicles and rub up against each other. That's dangerous. So I don't know what the specifics of that are going to be, but that business model is going to be harmed for the near future, like for the next 6, 12, 18 months.
So I should not be investing in a massive collection agency, because it's going to be really difficult. And I would assume, again, you're right, we don't know what's going to happen, but I would assume, okay, so you've got 600 cubicles over 2 floors. Maybe the go back to work plan is you can bring back 100 people. So,
maybe, or 50.
Or 50. So there has to be a desk, 3 empty desks, another desk, whatever, to promote physical distancing. Does that sound reasonable? I mean, we don't know, but that kind of makes sense to me, right?
Right. So our office, we're a bit different. We have small regional branches in Ontario, Quebec, BC, and Florida. So our offices were never huge to begin with. So moving to working from home wasn't as painful for us as it might be for other companies. I can tell you what we're looking at is, when we're allowed to go back in the office, we'll probably bring in 5 people into each branch, and make sure they're far apart from each other, and continue with everyone else working from home. So that would likely be the plan for larger agencies, but a higher ratio of people continuing to work from home and a lower ratio of people in the office.
Well, and you and I have both gone through this, because my company, Hoyes Michalos, has roughly 100 employees. And we were spread out in 20 some offices. The concentration, probably, 40 of the people would be in our head office in Kitchener. Of course, everybody's working from home now. So when we are able to be gradually returning to work, we'll be able to do the same thing as you. Well, okay, let's put one person in each office and gradually spread it out. But if I was a big, huge firm and I had 600 people all in the same place, number one, would have been much more difficult to bring them all home. And in fact, I suspect some of those big agencies were not able to do it, to all of a sudden have 600 VoIP phones. And I assume there's some security issues in your business too, right? Like, I probably shouldn't be phoning debtors using my cell phone. Am I correct on that?
Correct. So if there are 10 agents or more in an agency, the agency in Ontario is required to record their calls. So the calls have to go through their phone system somehow. So we have a VPN for people to log in, and then they're connected to our phone system, and they make calls from our phone systems that are physically inside our offices.
Yeah, and that's exactly the way we do it too. We've got a VoIP phone system, so that if I'm calling somebody from home, it's just the same as calling from the office. It's all being routed through the central servers. Right. I would imagine to have 600 simultaneous connections from outside would be a lot more difficult. So
more internet than they probably have. Absolutely. Right.
So it would be very difficult. So, okay, what is the prognostication then for my business? Because let's face it, this show is all about me, Blair. You've known me for a long time. You understand how it works. So I am thinking, well, I assume I'm going to get very busy in the summer and the fall because there is going to be this pent-up debt. People haven't been able to make payments on their credit cards and loans and whatever for 2 or 3 months. But when they get back to work, all the collectors then are calling. And that forces people to say, okay, now that I'm back to work, the courts are open. I don't want my wages to be garnished. I got to do something. But am I wrong? Is it likely that maybe collection activity will be very slow to come back? It may take a year. It may take a year and a half before it comes back to full throttle. So is this something that somebody who owes money should worry about? Should they worry about it in June or July? Should they not worry about it? What does the future hold?
Well, it depends what the creditors tell the agencies. Right now, car repossessions aren't happening, wages aren't being garnished, houses aren't having liens placed against them. The tipping point that sends people to you isn't happening. So that breaking point where people go, oh, I've got to file with a trustee, isn't happening yet. If things are slowly ramped up and there's very little shock to the system, and creditors and agencies work with consumers, you will probably see a small surge in business, but they won't be lined 3 blocks out your door. If the creditors were to say, all right, business as normal, take those cars, seize those houses, yes, you would have a huge amount of work because people have been impacted. Unemployment is going up. It really depends how the creditors drive the bus. If creditors are reasonable and they understand that this is a huge change to our country and that we have to work with people, you may see work return to normal, but not a huge surge. It really depends. What we're doing right now is we have to report to the bureaus every month. And so people we reported in January, we report again in February, we report again in March and April, saying, yes, they still owe the money, or no, they paid it, fix their credit rating. What we've decided to do as an agency is anyone during the situation that we would normally report to the bureau for the first time, we're holding off. So our clients are allowing us to do that. A big agency working for a bank may not have that freedom, may not have that option. So it really depends how the creditors allow the agents to accommodate the consumers.
Yeah, and if I had to predict, I would say it won't be flipping a switch. It will be a slow dial that is turned as agents gradually come back. That 600-person agency brings back 50 people, then 100, then 150. So the calls kind of ramp up. And so it's more of a gradual increase in collection activity. But again, I guess we will see. So predictions then. Do you predict that there will be a large collection agency that will go out of business? And I don't want you to name names unless you want to name names. I'm happy for you to do that. But
I wouldn't do that to my friends in the industry.
No, but
yes,
could it happen?
I think that the business model of cramming as many collection agents into as big a room as possible in downtown Toronto is no longer feasible. I think those businesses are going to have to change. Now, a lot of those agencies have a branch in Quebec because Quebec requires a brick and mortar in the province of Quebec. So they may start shifting work to other branches, or they may explore opening alternate branches outside of Toronto, or they will continue to have people work from home. If they were able to work from home, if they had the technical infrastructure, I think the office space movie cubicle hell is going to go away. Just because we're going to be living in with social distancing for the next 12 to 18 months. You can't build a business model on that. You can't just hire new people into that environment. You're going to have to change your model. So they're either going to have to adapt, or yes, they are going to go out of business.
So big is no longer good. It used to be economies of scale was the way you wanted to have it. I got 600 people in there. I can keep track of everybody. Whereas now, no, that's actually a liability. An agency like yours that has, 20 people in an office and they're all spread out. I mean, I've been to your office in Cambridge. It's not cubicle. I didn't see any cubicles. Everyone's got a desk.
No, I hate cubicles.
Yeah, they're all nicely spread out. So that's probably the future. And I guess if we want to end on an optimistic note, that's probably a good thing for debtors, because they are talking to a human being whose job then is to work out some kind of suitable arrangement. I mean, the money is owed, we got to collect it. But I would think if you're in a 600-person cubicle the size of your head, you got the tote board up there that says, how many calls did you make? You got the robo-dialer. It's a much less humane approach. Maybe the result of all this will be a more humane approach going forward. Is that possible?
I hope so. On my blog, I talk about how that's a horrible environment and always has been, because it's bad for the collection agent who has to go to work in that environment every day. It's bad as a business because you're treating your staff as numbers and you're not working with them, with the consumer. So you're driving your collectors to be stressful and antagonistic. So yes, I think it's better for everyone. If we run a more human business, we treat people with humanity, we're accommodating of people's concerns, and we try to work with them, because that's what collections should be. It should be negotiation between one human being and another, and coming up with a win-win solution for everyone.
Well, and frankly, from a business point of view, you probably collect more money when you're nice to people and give them time to pay and work out payment arrangements, rather than I'm taking you to court tomorrow and yelling and screaming. So right. Hopefully that is something that takes hold in the industry. So you mentioned your blog. I'm going to put a link to that in the show notes. Your blog is more geared towards the collection industry itself. It's stuff that you talk to other collection agencies about, in effect, if I am interpreting correctly. But I think it is interesting to see kind of the other side of it, because when I'm talking to someone on the phone, it helps me to understand who I'm talking to. And I think I always say to my clients, look, the collection agent you're talking to is also under some stress. They're also working from home. They don't know if they're going to have a job either. They've got targets to meet, or, they've got a job to do. So, if, like you say, if you treat everyone humanely, everything should go well.
Yeah. And on my blog, I do have some consumer-oriented articles: how to deal with identity theft, how to interpret your credit bureau, how long a debt is good for in each province. There is some consumer-oriented stuff there to try to help consumers be educated in how to negotiate with the agent.
Excellent. So I will put a link to that. Receivables.blogspot.com, I believe, is that the main one?
Yeah, or receivables.com. That'll get there too.
Receivables.com. There you go. So I will put a link to that in the show notes. Is that the best way for people to lurk around and watch what you're doing?
Yes, absolutely.
Excellent. So there you go. We've heard from the person on the inside. Collection activity is still happening. It is definitely slower than it was. But as the technology improves, as people figure out how to work from home and so on, it will gradually increase. So if you've got debts, okay, maybe you don't have to do anything about them for the next few weeks, but eventually you will. So the sooner you take action, the better. Blair, thanks very much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. That was Blair Demarco-Wettlaufer, an actual collection agent. I will put links to everything we talked about in the show notes over on our YouTube page. And thank you for being here, Blair. That is our show for today. Until next week, I'm Doug Hoyes. That was Debt Free in 30.